All right, welcome back everybody to Tying Tuesday. Brady with you again, tying up some more bugs. Today we have the Crystal Soft Hackle. So it's a cool swing fly, a nice lightweight nymph pattern with a good old Partridge hackle on it. Just some good traditional materials and a really cool but very effective fly to have around. So we'll get one going here for us. And starting it out on a Hanak hook today. This is the Hanak 290BL. It's a nymph and wet hook, so it caters itself nicely to this pattern. It's got an extra long shank as well as an extra long needle point on it. It's a barbless hook from Hanak. And then we're throwing a bead on this, and I'm using just a brass bead today. Since it is a soft hackle, I want it to be a little bit lighter weight than a tungsten bead head would be. A little bit more movement. And we got a gold one for the flavor of today's fly. And then the first thing we're going to do is start our thread like we usually do with the good old UTC. So we got UTC 70 denier in olive there. And we're just going to start that right behind the bead. Not going to weight this, as I mentioned. I want it to be a fairly lightweight nymph wet fly. So we'll get some locking wraps down on the shank and work all the way to the back where our first classic material is going to get tied in. A good old tailing material, some nice pheasant tail, and this is the brown pheasant tail today that I'm using. So great color, dyed color. You can use natural as well. But we're going to take a pretty good sized clump off of this feather. Somewhere in the 10 to 15 range. And doing our best to keep those tips nicely aligned there. And then I measure that up to my hook shank. We can transfer that to our left hand or other hand and secure it right on the back. So a nice bushy thick tail for this pattern. And then I'll walk on up over the top of it, and that helps keep some nice even thickness throughout. And then walk on back. Pretty simple pattern really overall, not too much to it, but a good build out. Makes for a really nice soft hackle fly. And our next material is our body material. This is just some ice dub in Peacock. So a great option from Hairline. And we're going to use a fair amount of this. We're going to noodle it up fairly good. Either using a wax or some sort of binding agent, some water if you keep water at your desk. But with ice dub, anything that you have that'll help sort of bind it into a somewhat tight dubbing noodle is going to help. And then we'll bring that material forward almost all the way to the bead, doing a full abdomen here. Make sure that stays tight as I go, this noodle. Building a taper and profile. And the next classic material we're adding in is the good old natural Peacock Hearl. It's a great material if you're just starting out tying. Definitely buy yourself some of this because you will use plenty of it. And we're going to make a little bit of a peacock collar as our thorax. And just leaving a little bit of room on the front for the final material. But I'm going to make kind of an even thread base here as best I can to wrap that peacock on, and then the soft hackle portion, that Partridge, that we're going to add in next. So a couple of strands of Peacock. We'll take those around, making a nice thorax for this fly. So also prop up our partridge feather a little bit. So I do try to stack a good amount of it in there as I work forward. And pretty close, basically touching that bead, as long as I have enough room to get a couple of wraps of partridge in there. So obviously a really solid fly if you're a two-handed fly angler. Also good on micro spay, but you can tie it on and fish it on a single hand rod, no problem. You know, hang it under an indicator, and then as it reaches the end of the drift, let it swing out and rise up in the column, and you might find some fish that are hanging out at the tail end of your runs that'll be more than happy to come up and take a swipe at it. So the final material, like I mentioned, is partridge. So the last classic natural material adding onto the Crystal Soft Hackle here. And we're going to take that and work the feather a little bit, grab the tip and pull as much of it rearward as we can. And then I'm also going to clean off all of this excess material that I don't need here. The back end of it, make a nice and clean feather to tie in, so that what we're left with here looks just like that, and then our tie-in point will be this small tag end on this side. And we'll just tie that right in. I'll try to avoid tying it in right at the bare stem because that's a weak point. Tie it in just a little bit further up, then you have more material to grab into, and it's just a little bit more durable, and you'll break less off that way. And clip out that excess material and give our soft hackle a couple of wraps here. So let me just half hitch my thread and remove that from the equation over on the bobbin cradle. And then we can wrap that partridge feather forward. So we're going to keep the mottled side facing forward, pull the stem 90 degrees perpendicular from the shank, and then kind of preen these feathers back a little bit as we wrap it right around the collar here. So we got one wrap. We'll probably give this two and call it good there. We could finish it off with a third, but I think that's enough for this fly. Sort of depends on the feather that you're working with sometimes. We can go through and capture that right behind the bead. Couple behind, couple in front. Clip out the extra. And then give this juicy little soft hackle a whip finish. You make a slight thread collar. If you want, you can come in with just a little more dubbing, which I'm going to do. You could always just do a thread collar right here, but just a nice little finishing touch. We can bring in that ice dub Peacock, wrap it a couple of times there. I even brought too much. Let's back off a little bit. There we go. Just a couple of turns of it until we're back to bare thread, and then we can sort of hide our thread down under that next to the bead with a few little whip finishes. So that is our nice little soft hackle there, the Crystal Soft Hackle. It's a really cool bug. Definitely a fun one to fish, especially if you like swinging flies, swinging light flies on a Scandi setup or something like that. This is a good bug for that type of rig. But yeah, it can be fished under any sort of indicator, single hand, maybe as a dropper as well. That would be a good option. But a nice little productive nymph that can pull a lot of fish out of the water for you. So we appreciate you watching. If you have suggestions on flies you want to see us tie in the future, drop us a comment below. We appreciate the likes and the whatever comments you have to offer, and just appreciate you watching. Thanks so much.